Ever feel like sometimes, the world of business tech is, how do I put this? Speaking a whole other language?
Well, it kind of
It's
is.
like everyone's throwing around jargon like cloud integration and system architecture, and you're just nodding along and like, yeah, yeah, I totally get it.
Right.
But inside, you're like, wait, what are they actually talking about?
It can definitely feel that way.
Today, we're tackling a career that thrives in that very world. ICT System Integration Consultants. They're the ones who actually speak the language.
That's a great way to put it. They're the interpreters, making sure all those complex systems, all that software, actually work together seamlessly.
Mm,
Because who wants a digital headache every morning?
not me. And we're lucky enough to have a stack of excerpts here from RoleCatcher, that career development platform. They've got guides, tips, the whole shebang. And we're going to break down what this tech-heavy role is all about.
Sounds like a plan.
And who knows, maybe by the end of this deep dive, you'll be adding ICT System Integration Consultant to your resume. Or at the very least, you'll finally understand what your IT department actually does all day.
The mystery will be revealed.
So let's start with the why. Why is this role even a thing? What's so important about it?
Well, it all boils down to this massive shift we're seeing in how businesses operate.
Go on.
Our sources from RoleCatcher, they use this phrase, greater automation and integration of systems.
Right, which is a mouthful. What does that even mean for, like, a normal person?
Basically, businesses are relying on more and more technology, and it's not just more tech, it's more connected tech. Cloud computing, AI, machine learning.
Buzzword alert.
I know, but hear me out. These aren't just trendy terms. They're fundamentally changing how we work. And someone needs to make sure all those systems actually talk to each other, share data, and don't just crash and burn in a heap of digital despair.
Hence the ICT System Integration Consultant.
Precisely. They're like the digital conductors, making sure the tech orchestra doesn't sound like, well, a bunch of cats walking on keyboards.
I was going to say a toddler banging on a drum set, but I like your analogy better. But let's get specific here. What do these ICT wizards actually do all day? RoleCatcher goes beyond the vague job titles and actually dives into the nitty-gritty.
And it's more than you might think. It's not just about coding or knowing how to use specific software.
Right, because anyone can Google how to do that.
Exactly. These consultants, they have to analyze a company's existing systems, figure out where the data is, how it's moving, or more importantly, not moving. They're like digital detectives looking for clues to solve the mystery of the broken data flow.
So problem solving is a huge part of this role then.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about identifying the problem, it's about designing the solutions. And sometimes those solutions involve building custom tools or finding creative workarounds to integrate systems that were never meant to talk to each other in the first place.
Okay, so we're talking serious brain power here. But what's in it for someone considering this path? I mean, besides the satisfaction of solving complex puzzles all day.
Well, RoleCatcher doesn't shy away from the perks, and there are some pretty enticing ones. High earning potential, for one.
Oh, yeah. How high are we talking?
We're talking starting salaries that are often significantly above average, even for entry-level positions. And that's just the beginning.
All right, that got my attention. What else?
Then there's the whole international aspect. Many roles offer the chance to work abroad, experience different cultures, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, now that's tempting. Who doesn't want to travel the world while getting paid to play with cool tech?
Exactly. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to be on the cutting edge of technology? You're constantly learning, growing, working with the latest and greatest gadgets and software. It's not just about fixing things, it's about shaping the future of how we work.
Okay, I have to admit, that's a pretty compelling pitch. But let's be real for a second. No job is all sunshine and roses. What are the downsides? RoleCatcher doesn't sugarcoat things, does it?
Not at all. They're very upfront about the fact that this line of work can be demanding. Long hours, high-pressure situations, it comes with the territory.
So not for the faint of heart, then?
Probably not the best fit for someone who hates change either. Because in the tech world, change is the only constant. You need to be comfortable with constantly learning, adapting, and sometimes just throwing out the rule book and figuring things out on the fly.
Sounds like you need a certain personality type to thrive in this kind of environment.
Absolutely. It's a trade-off, like anything else.
Hmm.
But for the right person, someone who thrives on challenge, who gets excited about new tech, and who's got the stamina to keep up in a fast-paced world.
It can be incredibly rewarding. Speaking of the right person, I have to say, I was surprised by the range of backgrounds RoleCatcher lists as potentially good fits for this role. I'll be honest, I went in expecting just the hardcore tech degrees, computer science, software engineering, that sort of thing.
Which makes sense on the surface.
But then they mentioned things like business administration, data science, even physics.
It makes you realize that this role is about more than just knowing how to code.
Hmm.
You're not just dealing with machines, you're dealing with people.
Ah, the human element. Can't escape it, can we?
Nope. You need to understand the business side of things, be able to communicate those often complex technical ideas clearly, and you have to be able to build relationships with different departments.
Because getting everyone on the same page, tech-wise, is probably like herding cats, right?
Something like that. So those soft skills, that ability to communicate, collaborate, even negotiate those, are just as important as the technical ones.
So you can't just be a coding genius hiding in the server room all day. You have to be able to talk to people, too.
Exactly. And in fact, RoleCatcher specifically highlights certain skills that I found interesting. Reading comprehension, critical thinking, active listening. These might seem like no-brainers, but
They're crucial.
absolutely. They're skills that translate across any industry, but especially in a role that bridges the gap between tech and business, where you're constantly having to process information, solve problems, and communicate effectively.
So you're not just an interpreter between systems, you're an interpreter between different ways of thinking. Which, now that I think about it, is a pretty valuable skill to have.
Absolutely.
And speaking of translating, RoleCatcher does a great job of laying out the career path for ICT System Integration Consultants. They break it down into those clear stages. You start as a junior consultant, work your way up to intermediate, and eventually, if you've got the skills and experience, you can become a senior consultant.
What I found really helpful was that they didn't just slap a title on each level. They actually described what each stage looks like.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
They talk about the specific responsibilities you might have, the kind of experience you typically need, even what you might say about your work at each level. It's specific, which I think is super helpful for anyone trying to picture themselves in that role.
It's like having a roadmap for your career. You can see where you're starting, where you can go, and what you need to do to get there.
Exactly. And that kind of clarity can be invaluable, especially in a field as dynamic as tech, where it's easy to feel like you're just bouncing from one shiny new thing to the next.
Yeah.
Having that clear path, that sense of progression, can make all the difference.
Absolutely. So we've established that this isn't your average IT desk job. But let's dig a little deeper into the day-to-day realities. What are some of the core tasks and skills that define this role according to RoleCatcher? Because I'm guessing it's more than just knowing computers.
Mm.
So we've established that this isn't your average IT desk job where you're like resetting passwords all day. But what does a day in the life of an ICT system integration consultant actually look like?
Well, it varies, of course. Every company is different. Every project is different.
Right.
But RoleCatcher does break down some core tasks that give you a good sense of what these consultants are actually doing on a daily basis.
Like what? Give me the inside scoop.
So one of the big ones, and this might sound a little jargony, but it's called data mapping.
Data mapping. Okay.
Basically, imagine you're dealing with a company that's been around for decades, right?
Oh, I can imagine.
They've got different departments using different software, some of it ancient, and none of it's really talking to each other.
A data silo nightmare.
Exactly. So the consultant comes in, and it's their job to make sense of that mess, to figure out where all the data lives, how it's moving or not moving between systems, and then...
Untangle the spaghetti.
That's a good way to put it. They have to untangle that spaghetti and then design those connections that will make the data flow smoothly across the entire organization.
So it's like being a digital plumber almost, making sure the pipes are connected and the data's flowing where it needs to go.
I like that analogy. And here's where it gets even more interesting and more challenging. RoleCatcher specifically calls out the issue of legacy systems.
Oh, yeah, those old clunky programs that nobody wants to touch but are somehow still mission critical.
You got it. And I think everyone's encountered those at some point.
I've heard horror stories.
Well, a big part of the job can be integrating those legacy systems with newer technologies, which often means finding some very creative workarounds or even building custom solutions from scratch.
So it's part technical expertise, part sheer ingenuity, and maybe a little bit of prayer.
Maybe a little prayer, for sure. You need to be resourceful and adaptable in this line of work, because you never know what kind of tech challenges you'll be facing from one day to the next.
Speaking of challenges, RoleCatcher also mentions a lot about testing and implementation. I imagine that's a crucial part of the process too, right?
Absolutely. You can't just design a system or integrate a bunch of systems and just hope for the best.
Because that's how you get the dreaded blue screen of death, right?
Exactly. You need to test everything rigorously to make sure it's stable,
Yeah.
secure, and that it actually does what it's supposed to do.
So lots of simulations, running different scenarios, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Think of it like building a bridge, right? You don't just design it on paper and then open it up to traffic.
You got to make sure it's not going to collapse.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You test the load capacity, the materials, everything, to make sure it can handle the real world.
And it's the same with these tech systems, right?
The stakes might be different, but the principle is the same.
Okay, I'm getting a whole new appreciation for what goes on behind the scenes to keep our digital world running smoothly.
It's a lot more complex than most people realize.
Yeah.
But testing is just one part of it. Then comes the actual implementation phase,
Which is?
actually rolling out the new system or the integrated solution to the entire organization.
Right.
And that can be a whole other beast altogether.
I bet.
It can involve training users, migrating huge amounts of data, troubleshooting any technical hiccups, and just generally holding everyone's hand while they adjust to the new system.
So again, it's not just a tech job, it's a very human job too.
100%. And that's why those soft skills we were talking about earlier are so crucial.
Because you can be the most brilliant tech mind in the world, but if you can't communicate effectively with people.
You're not going to get very far in this role. RoleCatcher actually dedicates a whole section to the importance of communication for ICT integration consultants.
Like what kind of communication? Give me some examples.
Well, for starters, you need to be able to explain complex technical concepts to non-technical people.
So no jargon allowed.
Not unless you want to see everyone's eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
You have to be able to break things down in a way that everyone can understand, regardless of their technical background.
Right, because not everyone speaks binary.
Exactly.
Right.
And then there's the whole managing expectation side of things,
Mhm.
keeping stakeholders informed, providing regular updates, and being transparent about any challenges or roadblocks along the way.
Because nobody likes surprises when it comes to their tech, right?
Especially not unpleasant ones. And then, of course, there's the whole office politics side of things.
Ah, yes, the human factor.
You're often dealing with different departments, different personalities, different priorities.
It sounds like you need to be a diplomat as much as a technologist.
Diplomacy definitely comes in handy. And on top of that, you need strong problem-solving skills, the ability to think on your feet, and a healthy dose of adaptability. Because in this line of work, things rarely go exactly according to plan.
So you need to be able to roll with the punches and come up with creative solutions on the spot.
That's what makes it exciting, or at least that's what you tell yourself when things inevitably go sideways.
Right. So, given all of that, what specific skills does RoleCatcher actually recommend for someone interested in this path? Because we've talked about technical skills, we've talked about soft skills, but what does that look like in practice?
They actually break it down into those two main categories: technical skills and those essential soft skills.
Oh.
On the technical side, you've got your foundational understanding of operating systems, databases, network protocols.
The nuts and bolts.
Exactly. The nuts and bolts of how computers and networks actually work. You need that solid foundation.
But I'm guessing it goes beyond just the textbook knowledge, right?
Oh, absolutely. What's interesting here is that RoleCatcher stresses adaptability and continuous learning.
Which makes sense in a field that's constantly evolving.
Exactly. The specific technologies you work with will vary depending on the company, the industry, the project. So being a quick study is essential.
So it's not enough to just know, like, Java or Python. You need to be able to pick up any programming language or at least understand the basics pretty darn quickly.
Exactly. It's not about memorizing syntax. It's about being able to learn and adapt to whatever technology comes your way.
Which is a good life skill in general, I'd say. The world's not slowing down anytime soon.
Right. And RoleCatcher actually had a fascinating section on emerging trends in ICT system integration. It really got me thinking about the future. Because it's not enough to just keep up. You got to be ahead of the curve, especially in tech.
Okay, so let's put on our futurist hats for a minute. What's on the horizon? What's going to be keeping these ICT gurus up at night 5-10 years down the line?
Well, one thing that RoleCatcher really hammered home was the rise of hyperautomation.
Hyper-automation. Sounds intense.
It is. Forget just automating simple tasks, like sending out emails or scheduling meetings.
Then they're automated that.
Right. This is about using AI and machine learning to streamline entire business processes, making them smarter, faster, more efficient.
Okay, so now I'm picturing robots doing our taxes and ordering takeout. Sounds pretty great, to be honest.
Right. But it also raises the question, where do humans fit into this hyper-automated future?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And this is where ICT System Integration Consultants come in. They're the ones who will be designing and implementing these AI-powered systems, making sure they actually work, that they integrate seamlessly with existing infrastructure.
So they're not just connecting systems, they're connecting systems that are practically thinking for themselves.
It's a whole other level of complexity for sure. And it's not just about the technical know-how either.
There's that human element again.
Exactly. RoleCatcher talks about the ethical considerations too, making sure these AI-powered systems are unbiased, that they're secure, and that they actually benefit the organization and society as a whole.
Right, because the last thing we need is some kind of dystopian sci-fi movie where the robots take over.
Exactly. We need to be mindful of the potential consequences, even as we're excited about the possibilities. And speaking of potential consequences, we can't forget about cybersecurity.
Oh, right. With all these interconnected systems, security has to be a top priority, right?
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is only going to become more critical as we connect more and more devices and systems.
Because the more entry points you have, the more vulnerable you are.
Precisely. And what's interesting is that RoleCatcher actually highlighted how those data silos we talked about earlier, those pockets of information that aren't integrated, can actually pose a bigger security risk.
Really? How so?
Because they're harder to monitor, harder to control. It's like having a security system in your house where some doors and windows are just left wide open.
Okay, that's not a good thing.
Nope. But an ICT integration consultant who can break down those silos and create a more unified, secure system, they're going to be worth their weight in gold.
So not just tech skills, not just people skills, but now cybersecurity skills are essential too. These folks are going to need a whole arsenal of expertise.
It's a demanding role, no doubt. And we haven't even touched on the Internet of Things, IoT, yet.
Oh, right. The Internet of Things. That's a whole other layer of complexity.
Billions of devices already connected to the Internet,
Yeah.
from smart refrigerators to industrial sensors, and it's only going to explode in the coming years.
Okay, now I'm really getting overwhelmed. It's like that scene in a movie where the hacker is frantically typing, trying to connect to the mainframe before the timer runs out.
I know, right?
Except it's real life, and the timer never stops.
You're not wrong. But you know what? It's also what makes this career so exciting.
How so?
You're at the forefront of this technological revolution, solving these complex problems and shaping the future of how we live and work.
It's a lot of pressure, but it's also a lot of potential for someone who's up for the challenge, someone who, likes to live life on the edge a little bit.
Precisely. And if RoleCatcher is right, it's a career path with incredible growth potential, both in terms of salary and the opportunity to make a real impact.
So for anyone listening who's feeling that spark of curiosity, that maybe this is for me feeling, what advice would you give them? Where do they even begin?
Well, the good news is RoleCatcher doesn't just leave you hanging. They actually offer some really great practical tips.
Hit me with them.
First and foremost, build a strong foundation in the core technical concepts. We're talking programming, databases, networking, all that good stuff.
The essential building blocks.
Exactly. But don't just study the theory, get your hands dirty. Personal projects, internships, even volunteering your tech skills for a nonprofit. Anything to get real-world experience and build those problem-solving muscles.
Because nothing teaches you faster than actually breaking something and having to figure out how to fix it, right?
Truer words have never been spoken. And here's the other thing. Don't underestimate the power of networking.
Good old-fashioned networking.
It's still crucial, especially in a field like tech. Connect with people in the industry, go to conferences, join online communities. It's not just about finding a job, it's about learning from others, staying ahead of the curve, and, finding your people.
Finding your tribe in the tech world. I love it. And on that note, if you're looking for a place to start, RoleCatcher itself seems like a pretty valuable resource.
Definitely worth checking out. They've got everything from CV tailoring to interview practice to actually connecting you with potential employers.
It's like having a digital career coach in your pocket. But I guess regardless of what tools or resources you use, the most important thing is to just stay curious, right? To have that mindset of continuous learning.
100%. Because in the tech world, the only constant is change.
And on that thought-provoking note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the world of ICT System Integration Consultants.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We explored what they do, why their role is so important in today's business world, and the skills you'll need to thrive in this ever-evolving field.
We even took a peek into the future.
We did. We explored the challenges and opportunities that these consultants are facing as technologies like AI, cybersecurity, and the IoT continue to reshape our world. It's an exciting time to be in tech.
It really is.
So if there's one key takeaway from our deep dive today, it's this. Whether you're considering this as a career path or just curious about the future of technology, the ability to connect the dots, to bridge the gap between those complex systems and, let's be honest, even more complex human needs, that's only going to become more valuable in the years to come.
No matter what the future holds, one thing's for sure. It's going to be interesting.
That's for sure. And on that note, we'll wrap things up for today.
Until next time.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those connections strong.